How's it going, everybody? Just wanted to kind of check in. Had a couple of questions about why I chose the mount that I did when replacing the Atlas. So what I plan to do here is just kind of walk through the things that I wanted out of a new mount. It wasn't a decision that I took lightly. It's several $1,000s. I made the decision to replace my Atlas about a year ago and spent about a year looking at them, kind of deciding what I wanted out of a new mount, what I was willing to spend on a new mount, and kind of my needs too. Generally, I've been imaging at about 660 millimeters of a focal length, or maybe slightly shorter with a reducer. And what I wanted to get into was a little bit longer focal length stuff. I wanted it to have a little bit more capacity than the Atlas, and I wanted to keep the cables nice and clean. I'd done a lot of cable management stuff with the Atlas, so essentially I had 3 cables running up to the mount, one for the power, one for the USB, and one for where the hand controller would go. That was connected through EQ mod. So there were basically 3 wires that would move while it was tracking, and I really liked that. And I wanted to keep something similar to that in a new mount. And then I also wanted some of the newer bells and whistles, the power up on the declination plate, the USB ports up there, GPS, a couple of things like that. My mount, the Atlas, originally started out as a non-go-to, and somebody upgraded it in the past to the go-to motors and mother or main board, and then I bought it after that. So it's been a go-to mount for me ever since I've had it, but generally no bells and whistles on it at all. So we'll kind of get into it here. The first consideration was the cost. The Atlas is kind of the bottom of the tier. I wanted to go between, let's say, $2,000 and $3,500 that I was willing to spend on a new mount. It's just a hobby for me. I could not really justify spending $5,000 or $6,000 on Mach 1 or a really nice high-end mount like that, just to do what I do, which is just image for fun. So the Atlas starts out at about $2,000. Every once in a while they'll go on sale for about $1,800, $1,900, something like that. And that's with the 2-inch tripod, the standard one. CGX is about $2,300 with that same 2-inch tripod. And then the G11, the Losmandy G11, is about $3,400. That's with the Gemini 2 and a 2-inch, not a 2-inch, the heavy-duty, either folding or non-folding tripod. They're about $3,400 for that package. And then the CEM60 is about $2,800, about $2,200 for the mount head. And my consideration was for the tri-pier for the CEM60. I'll go ahead and show that now. I would not have bought the CEM60 with a 2-inch tripod. I think that wouldn't have been stable enough. And I think if you put even a Mach 1 on a 2-inch, let's say Atlas tripod, I don't think it's going to perform as well as it could. So the 2-inch tripods were pretty much out for me and kind of deal breakers, but not overall. I think they're just not up to the load capacity if you really want to get into some heavier loads on top. The heavy-duty tripod out of the G11 I think is up to the task. It's a really nice mount on a really nice tripod. It's nice and stable, but it does cost the most. CEM60, like I say, I was willing to go with the tri-pier only. I did get one of those used. I got it with the case for about $450, which I thought was a pretty good price. Normally they're about $750 for the tri-pier with the case. And then I got the CEM60 mount for just a little bit less than the $2,200. It was on like a 5% off site. So the capacities are rated about 44 pounds for the Atlas. I never imaged with more than maybe 20, 22 pounds with a CCD camera and a 4.3-inch refractor on it, along with all of the other stuff that I put on top, the dew straps and the controller, the focuser, the focus controller, and the cooler for the camera, things like that. And I had a USB hub on top as well. I would probably follow the half rule of for imaging, even with a new Atlas, maybe 20, 25 pounds worth of imaging, just because of that 2-inch tripod. I think about the same for the CGX. They rated at 55 pounds. I might be willing to go just a little bit higher than 25 pounds, maybe 30, but I don't think I'd get close to that, especially with the 2-inch tripod. The heavy-duty tripod on the G11, it's rated at 60 pounds. I think I would get maybe 45, 50 pounds of imaging gear. I don't think I would max out even a G11. even though it's rated for 60 pounds worth of astrophotography gear. And they do specify that it's 60 for photography, not just visual. CEM60 is also rated at 60 pounds, but I would probably put maybe 45 pounds on that, maybe slightly less than what I would do with a G11. So some of the other kind of criteria that I had, the internal wires and cabling, I wanted a clean look. I didn't want to have to worry with wires getting really cold and rigid. I'm at 42 degrees north latitude, and it can get pretty cold and things can get pretty stiff when it's cold out. So the fewer wires, the better. The Atlas, I'm going to give that an average. I had it set up really nice, but when the mount head moves, so does the power to the mount and either the hand controller or the EQ mod, EQ Direct module and USB converter. That also moves with the mount, so there is some movement with the cords. CGX is getting better. It's a new mount. They took some care to run those as many wires as they could through the mount, but I don't think it's quite there yet. The G11 I'm going to give as poor, and the reason for that is what I don't like about the G11 are a couple of things. The external motors, and then the wires that come down to this big, I'm going to say kind of a bulky control module right here. It's just some extra wires that I think could have been run, or I would like to see run through the mount if at all possible. I have asked some friends of mine, these wires do not get in the way when it's tracking, but there's still the possibility that they're going to get snagged on something, they'll get in the way of something. So the fewer wires, the better. That was one of my goals. And then the CEM60, I'm going to give that as a good, with the exception of the polar alignment scope. It needs power, and to get the power to it, you have to put a tiny wire, you have to run that between the mount head and the polar scope. And now you can take it off once you've done your polar alignment, but it's just a little bit of a hassle. And I really wish iOptron would have run that wire internally. That would have been a perfect solution for something like that. So a couple of other things that I was considering was USB and 12 volt power up as high as I could get it on the mount. The Atlas and the CGX, the G11 don't have any on the declination plate. The CEM60 has 4 unpowered USB ports up on top. I wish they were powered. It doesn't seem like it would be that hard to make them powered. I would have paid a little bit more to get them powered. So as it is right now, I'm keeping my powered USB port up on top, and so I can have a little bit of extra USB power up there. Same with the 12 volt. None of the others have it. The CEM60 does have 2 12 volt outputs, 5 amps total between them. One of the perks of the CEM60 is you can run your own wires up there. So my plan is to either split those two off onto separate circuits or run another 12 volt circuit up there through the mount so I could have an extra one. The others don't have the option to do that. Knobs and setup, I'm a portable astronomer, imager, whatever you want to call me, so this was important to me. The Atlas, I'm going to say it was good. I never had any trouble at all with the knobs. Those little metal things, the little metal screws that people would say every once in a while would bend, I never had an issue with it. The main screw that ran up through the tripod into the bottom of the mount, I would just put a little bit of tension on that. I could move the mount in azimuth and elevation just fine, and I really never had a problem with it. So I'm going to say as far as knobs and setup, that's good. CGX, I think, did a really nice job. They're a little bit bigger. They stick out a little bit farther. When it's cold and you have gloves on your hand, it's really nice not to have to use your fingertips to grab a knob and turn it, or grab a cold metal knob with ungloved hands, because it seems like your fingertips go numb pretty quick. Losmandy, I don't have any experience with those as far as setting those up, so I can't really talk about that. I am going to knock the CEM60 a little bit. The knobs are fairly small. They're difficult to get to. Most of the times you're going to need to take your gloves off to get to them. And there's a lever type tool where once you finger tighten your knobs down, you take the tool and you slide it in the little hole and you torque it down just a little bit more. So that is, I wish those knobs were a little bit bigger. I wish they stuck out just a little bit farther, kind of like that CGX, so you could get your hands around them a little bit easily, or a little bit more easily. Head weight, like I say, I'm portable, so not getting any younger, and I would rather not carry, a 50-pound mount head in a case if I don't have to. The current Atlas, the EQ G Pro, weighs 34 pounds. CGX, and I was surprised at this, the 44-pound head weight only, and I double-checked that. That's heavy to me, and so that was a little bit of an eye-opener. G11 weighs in at about 33 pounds. CEM60 with the center balanced design is 27 pounds. It is a noticeable difference going from the CEM60 to the Atlas, picking it up just mount head to mount head. So those 7 pounds make quite a difference. Some of the other things I was interested in, Alt Az mode for outreach. I do a lot of that. A lot of times we're either doing solar or in the early evenings when the planets and moon are available. So I thought it would be kind of nice to have a big scope on one side and a small refractor on the other side, just to get that many more eyeballs looking through scopes. It wasn't a deal breaker. It would have been a nice perk had I gone with the Atlas. CGX and G11 do not offer that, nor does the CEM60. Counterweight shaft. This is a little interesting. The Atlas has a 25 millimeter counterweight shaft. CGX is 20 millimeters. The CGX advertises a 55-pound capacity. In order to get that much capacity, you're going to have an awful lot of weights, or quite a ways away from the mount head out on the counterweight shaft. And I think 20 millimeters worth of a counterweight shaft is pretty small to carry that kind of load. You might get some flexing in that. G11 has the largest counterweight shaft at 31.77 millimeters, and the CEM60s is 28 millimeters. CEM60s is longer. It's about 18 inches long. It's almost a counterweight in and of itself, just because you can feel the bulk to it. You can just feel that it's nice and solid. The polar scope, the lighting, an illuminated polar scope, I'm going to give it the Atlas an average on that. It has the nice little kind of cross in the middle with the circle for Polaris. I had mine lined up with the counterweight shaft so that I could put I could rotate the mount head so that the counterweight shaft was between Polaris and Kochab, and that would kind of give me the correct azimuth, I guess, off of Polaris for the polar alignment. And it worked really well for me. I could get it polar aligned pretty well. I would polar align it through the scope, and then I would drift align it. CGX does not come with a polar scope. My understanding now is they have one that you can kind of bolt onto the side, which I don't think is a really good solution. I have not used their all sky alignment. I know that you can do that, and I've heard that it's fairly accurate, but I would just like to be able to look through the polar scope, eyeball it, especially just for visual observing, and move on. If you're going to image, especially at focal lengths beyond maybe 1,000 millimeters, you're going to have to drift align anyway. Not familiar with the G11s. I'm going to give the CEM60 an above average polar scope. There's a really nice app out there that I reviewed that makes it really easy to find where you need to put Polaris on the circle. The only knock there is that wire that has to run between the polar alignment scope and the mount head. As far as support, the Atlas, Orion, it's average if you buy it new. If you buy it used, tough luck. You're not going to be able to get parts, and you're kind of out on your own if something breaks on it. But if you buy it new, you can get replacement parts, and I think they're pretty decent. CGX, I'm going to give an average. I've had a couple of other Celestron mounts, and only the couple of times I've had to interact with their tech support or something, they've been pretty good. G11, I've heard Scott Losmandy is great. He answers emails, he takes phone calls, parts are available for older mounts. I mean, they could probably even go out of their way to make you one. My only concern with that would be if you're spending this kind of money and expect a mount to last 10, 15, 20 years. Hopefully Scott hasn't left the business in 10, 15, 20 years, and or someone else takes it over and parts may become hard to come by or tech support changes. So while it's great right now, it is just a consideration. I'm not saying that it would happen, obviously, but it's just something to be concerned about. CEM60, the times that I've interacted, they've been fantastic. Their emails back are very, very fast and very, very short as well. They I had a question and the answer was yes, and I got a one-word email back. The answer was yes, and that's all I needed. They also offer things like the diameters of their plates. If you wanted to make your pure plate by yourself, they give you all the schematic type drawings. So it seems like they're pretty good about helping people out as far as that goes. Okay, so the next things, and we are kind of getting down a little bit lower on the level of importance. The case. None of the other three have cases, and I actually absolutely hate the one that comes with the CEM60. The foam is it's pretty stiff foam. You can't slide your fingers down between the foam and the mount very easily to pull it out. It does not give. It basically requires two hands and a couple of knees to hold the case down while you pull the mount head out. It's a very tight fit in there for the mount head. The other thing is you have to return the mount to the zero position before you put it back in, and I guess the zero latitude position. So I'm at 42 degrees, and which obviously it tilts the mount from the plate or the base of the mount. So at the end of the night, I would have to roll that thing back to 0 degrees latitude to where it's straight up and down, and then put it in the case, and then pull it out the next time, and then roll it right back to 42.5 degrees of latitude. So it would be really nice if they had some extra space in the case so you could put it in there, set for your latitude, and you know, at most if you travel just a little bit, you might have to roll it 1 or 2 degrees, but otherwise it would make going in and out a whole lot easier. They all have the dual saddles for Vixen and Losmandy, so we'll just move on from there. They all have permanent PEC. Kind of a non-issue, I think. Most imagers will tell you that PhD guiding and permanent PEC will fight, and I have found that to be the case. I tried that out with the CEM60. It did not work for me. I trained the PEC, kept it running, and then I tried to guide. I actually watched it for several minutes, and it was nice and smooth. And then I tried to guide. I'll show you that picture of the screenshot of where I began the guiding after above and beyond the PEC, but it went bonkers, so I shut off the permanent PEC. The only exception to that is EQ Mod with the Atlas. They've got a really nice PEC routine where it'll learn the PEC and then it'll compensate accordingly. So it essentially, I don't know exactly what the math is behind it, but it'll basically combine the PhD guide commands and the PEC commands to where it's not overcompensating or undercompensating. And I had a lot of success with that. As far as GPS, one of the bells and whistles, you can get an extra GPS module for the Atlas, $152. The CGX comes with it. The G11, another $150 for that one, and the CEM60 already has it built in. A couple of other mounts I've had, the GPS would take 30 to 45 seconds or so to lock up. The CEM60 outside at night takes maybe 10 to 15 seconds to lock up. Even in the house, I think it was about 20 seconds for it to connect. So I was actually kind of impressed with that. GPS is not a deal breaker. I generally know where I am. And if not, I've got the phone, you know, that has the GPS app on it, and you can just type it in. So some of my main drawbacks that are cumulatively speaking, I guess these are the deal breakers. The drawbacks to the Atlas was I'm going to call it the Az EQ Pro. It's not the Atlas that I was considering. The 2-inch tripod, some of the cables move, and it's average in most categories. It's just basically an average mount. It will get the job done, especially at wider or shorter focal lengths. But you're not going to get people walking up to you at Star Party saying, "Oh, cool, what kind of mount is that?" The CGX, again, the tripod, the counterweight shaft is pretty thin. The weight to capacity ratio, I think, is fairly high with that mount head weight. And you do need a little tool to snug down some of the bolts. I would rather have as tool-free setup as I can have. The Atlas did not require any tools. It was just all knobs. The G11, it was the most expensive. Like I say, I was willing to go that high if I felt like that was the biggest bang for my buck, but it kind of wasn't in this case. The extra cables and the external motors, and somewhat, I'm going to call it a clunky Gemini box. I don't necessarily like the idea of a touchscreen control. I haven't used it, so I can't speak to it, but it just seems like, I mean, even on an iPad, you have to take your gloves off to work your iPad. So in cold weather, different types of climates, that touchscreen may become an issue. The CEM60, probably by far the biggest drawback are those gears. They're magnetically loaded. You do have to get a feel for them. You do have to be careful with them. You have to be careful about how you pull the mount out, how you put it away, when you lock things down, how you lock things down. But that being said, I've set it up, well, I've set it up now probably a dozen times at least, and after 3 or 4 times, I felt fairly competent in setting the gear mesh. The first couple of times you do it, you'll do it too tight, and you'll hear the grinding of the motors, and you think you've just screwed yourself. But in reality, you haven't hurt anything. It's just the stepper motors that are intended to slip the way they do. It's a little bit of a new design. It's kind of unique. The weight to mount head ratio is pretty high, just a 27-pound mount head. You do need the tool. There's one lever. Once you snug the bolts down between the mount head and the tri-pier, you need to tighten them up with just a little lever. And then there are these bolts on the tri-pier, which I absolutely hate. They're very, very similar to a clamp, with the the bolt with the metal rod sliding down between it, or back and forth rather, so you can get a pretty good torque on it, and then slide it over to the other side and torque it again, for a half turn. And there are, I think, there are 9 of those on the tri-pier, 3 for each of the legs as they go in, and then 3 on each collar, and there are 2 collars for the pier itself. Each of which you can only turn about a half turn, and then you have to slide the little thing through and turn it again. And man, that just gets obnoxious, and they kind of click every time you turn them over, and I just wish there was a better way. I'm going to look into getting some different types of bolts for those things. Oh, and then there are the 3 knobs that you can kind of level the tri-pier with, and those are big and easily grabbed, so those aren't terrible. But those other style are just horrible. So the next, this is the kind of the winners category, or the best things about each of the mounts. The EQG Pro, the Az, is the cost. It's the cheapest, $2,000, and you're in there with a pretty good mount that'll do a pretty good job. It'll do some cool things as far as Az mode. You can put the 2 telescopes on there if you want, and I'm going to call it kind of a tool-free setup. You just tighten up all the knobs and you're good to go. The CGX, the best parts of that, the ergonomics, it has handles for the mount head. So if you need to get a nice good grip on it before you put it in your case at the end of the night, you can. It is heavy though. The handles and knobs on it are a little bit bigger. They're a little bit farther out. And as far as cabling goes, I think it's on track. It's got a good thing going there. Losmandy, the best things obviously are the name, the reputation. It just works. It's nice and smooth. It does require some tweaking. I've read of people having to change the gear mesh just when the temperature changes substantially, not just a few degrees. So like, let's say from early spring to midsummer, maybe a 40-50 degree change, you may have to change the gear mesh, which requires going in and tweaking it. But you just can't argue with a very well-made mount like that. But you do pay for that quality. And then I think some of the best things about the CEM60 is the ability to run more wires. I went through a couple of things I'd like to do with that. You can just pull that declination plate off, run your wires right up through the polar scope bore axis, and put it back on, and you can have as much as you want on top. So it keeps the cabling nice and clean. Warranty, it's a 2-year warranty. There's good support, and again, the mount head weight, this one was the lightest. So that's kind of where I landed. The Atlas, overall average. the CGX. It's a really good start. Maybe the next major iteration of that mount, they'll take everything good from the current one and add a couple of things or make a couple of things better, and that might be a winner if they could shave some of the mount head weight off and up the counterweight shaft dimensions. I think that'd be two of the biggest things. G11, standard, great performer for a long time, well known. Lots of support out there on the forums. However, I did decide the best bang for the buck was the iOptron CEM60. That's the one I went with, and I'm really happy with it. The few times I've imaged with it, it's done really well. It's guided really well. Haven't had any bit of trouble. And like I say, once you get used to the gear meshing or engaging the gears, I guess is the way I should put that. Once you get used to engaging the gears, I think it'll be a really nice mount. So that's all that I have. Hope it helps you guys make any decisions you might make. And if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the comments and I'll answer them. You guys take care.